What's going on, YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte. And today we are looking at our Western Conference Finals matchup in 2022 between the Colorado Avalanche and the Edmonton Oilers. The path to success here to this point for both of these organizations has been pretty interesting. The Oilers winning the Battle of Alberta, beating the Calgary Flames in 5 games. Kind of shocking the hockey world there. Taking the league by storm, beating a really good Calgary Flames team. Made Jacob Markstrom look silly, honestly, completely goofied on Jacob Markstrom. Really good job there by the Oilers. A lot of this thing has been led by Connor McDavid. He has been incredible this playoffs, and it's just nobody's going to stop this guy. But there are some concerns about the Oilers going into this series and this matchup against the Colorado Avalanche, who get back to the Western Conference Finals for the first time since 2002. It's been a long run here for the Avs. It's been 2 decades exactly, and the Avalanche are back, and they're looking to make some noise. Again, they had a pretty big series against the Blues. They kind of took control of their series as well. Both these teams kind of constricted out their opponents pretty quickly. So we're going to see here what happens. This is going to be a really good matchup, a very high-scoring matchup, to be completely honest. In terms of the Avalanche side of things, they just have so much depth. I mean, you look at their roster, this is a team that's just not going to be messed around with. And the problem I have for the Oilers is they lack that depth. That's been the biggest problem for this team since really Draisaitl and McDavid came in, is they haven't had the depth. But you do look at the scoring side of things. I mean, Evander Kane has really played well in this playoffs. He's gotten a hat trick. He's been on the score sheet. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, you'd like to see a little bit more from him. Zach Hyman's played fairly well. Puljujärvi's done pretty well in the playoffs. So there is optimism that the depth can hold up. But the problem is, the Avalanche, Jared Bednar, in terms of any matchup, he could roll out any of his 4 lines, and I think that could tire out the Oilers as the series goes along. And if they focus on taking out McDavid, are the other guys going to be able to step up? Because I think of the teams that they've played, the Oilers have, McDavid's been able to outmatch teams, because obviously the agenda is to stop McDavid. But I do truly think that when you look at this matchup, the Avalanche have enough guys that would be able to shut down McDavid. Now, obviously, you can't completely shut him down. It's, kind of like the Nathan MacKinnon side, for the Avalanche. But that's really going to be an interesting matchup. McDavid versus MacKinnon. I think that's going to be really nice. Some of the best players in the National Hockey League. I think that's definitely something to look at. And considering we haven't seen a team win a Stanley Cup, even go to the Stanley Cup final, with a $10+ million contract. You look at McDavid and what he's making, there is reason to believe that the Oilers could end up getting there. In terms of goaltending, I think it's favored here for the Avalanche. Even in that series against the Flames, Mike Smith did look suspect at points. That one goal against Rasmus Anderson, completely the fire alarm goes off in my head just seeing that. That is slightly concerning, giving up goals like that. You just can't do that, especially against the Colorado Avalanche, who will throw everything at Mike Smith. I do think he could get outmatched here. We did see that in the first round against maybe questionable goaltending from the Preds without Juice. Connor Ingram held his own, but still just got overpowered. And kind of the same thing for Binnington and Ville Husso for the Blues. They just got overpowered by the offense. That's really what it came down to. Even Jacob Markstrom, kind of fell victim on the other side from McDavid. So it just, both sides can score goals. And that's really what this series is going to be about. So if that's the case, it's a very run and gun game. I'd rather have Darcy Kemper in between the pipes than Mike Smith. And that's just the reality of it. The Avalanche have their defensive as a structure some issues. But I think they've been able to score their way out of these issues, and I don't know if they will be able to do that as easily against the Oilers. With that said, I think the biggest difference between these two teams is the defense. Because in terms of defensive skill, the Oilers are way outclassed. This is a team that's been ridiculed all season. Duncan Keith, Darnell Nurse fought through it, but he hasn't been himself. Tyson Barrie, Cody Ceci. I mean, these guys will get pounded by the Colorado Avalanche's defense, and I just don't. In terms of any of those defensemen, I don't really see anybody that can shut down Nathan MacKinnon to the same extent that I think some of the Avalanche defensemen could not easily shut down McDavid, because nobody can, but there's going to be more opportunity for the Avalanche's stars to kind of expose the defense of the Oilers, and I think that is really the biggest issue here for the Oilers is their defense. And I think that could be a problem for them here. Looking at forwards, I would say it's the most evenly matched. But with that said, the depth goes to the Avalanche. I mean, bringing in guys like Arturi Lehkonen at the deadline, Val Nichushkin, who has just been taking over and scoring a shit ton of goals himself. I don't see how the Oilers can compete with that in terms of their depth. Again, if Val Nichushkin is scoring 1 or 2 goals a game, you need Ryan Nugent-Hopkins or Zach Hyman kind of scoring at that same pace. And that's just, you need that to be happening for them. So, again, with that said, I think really the biggest deterrent between these two teams is the goaltending and the defense. And I do think the Avalanche have the edge in both of those. And I think things get a little bit closer for forwards. But even with that said, I have to give it to the Avalanche. They have the more star power, even up front, which is closer because of McDavid and Draisaitl. But even with that, it's the Avalanche. And, I said that I've been giving credit to these teams that the Avalanche have played the last 2 series. I gave credit to Nashville. They got swept. I gave credit to St. Louis, maybe taking this to 7. They kind of dragged this to 6, but they did get it to 6. But even with that said, Colorado had full control throughout this entire playoff so far. So unless the Oilers go in there and win games 1 or 2 and make this kind of interesting, I think this could be a very difficult series for the Oilers to dictate play. Now, they did shock me in the second round. They did come in, beat a good Calgary Flames team, but the Flames are more of a, they call it Sutter's house or whatever, and they were able to break right through that structure. But the Flames didn't have the skill and the super firepower, which has been the Flames' problem for the last couple years. Despite even having guys like Elias Lindholm and Johnny Gaudreau, they do have some anchors on their team. For the Avalanche, there's no anchors to this team, and that is really where things get interesting, because they could score from the blue line. They can score from their forwards. You're getting Devon Tays, who's got 6 or 7 goals. Cale Makar, who's got a couple goals. Sammy Girard, who's been a really good, guy moving the puck up. And, unfortunately, Girard's out, which actually could be, I hate to say it like this, but it could be a benefit here for the Oilers in this series. In terms of their head-to-head matchups, in the 3 games they played, the Avalanche did win 2 of those 3 matchups. The Oilers obviously winning 1 of those 3 matchups. So I guess in that sense, there is an edge for the Avalanche. It's not that big of a difference, but it is something to consider. In terms of goals scored throughout the series, though, in those 3 games, the Oilers did score 9 goals compared to the Avalanche, who only scored 8. But again, it's the wins that matter. It's not the quality of the wins. So in that sense, they have the better record. And again, the regular season matchup doesn't matter because it's the playoffs. It's totally different now. And the mentality and the momentum and everything like that has totally changed since the regular season when these teams last met. With that said, let me get to my predictions. So we've got the Edmonton Oilers. Like I said, McDavid fuel all over the place. He's been taking the gas. He has been all over the place. He has been the best player in the National Hockey League. And it's not even really that close. But to be fair, Nathan MacKinnon, Gabe Landeskog, Mikko Rantanen, they're all talented. Obviously, MacKinnon is the leader of that group, so he will be the competition. The head-to-head between MacKinnon and McDavid will be put on full display here in the Western Conference Finals. But the Avalanche have so much more depth, forwards, defense, And to be honest, head-to-head goaltending, the Avalanche also have the edge there. The Avalanche are by far the better hockey team here, and unfortunately for the Oilers, I think their Cinderella story run comes to an end. For the first time since 2002, the Avalanche are back in the Western Conference Final, and I do think they pull it off, and I think they win this series in 6 games. I'm giving them 6 games because this is a team that's been just overly dominant throughout the regular season. And unless they face a hurdle going down 2-0 in those first 2 games at home, facing a little adversity, and we haven't seen the Avalanche face any adversity yet this postseason, so that's the only way I think this series will be interesting. Even if they split the first 2 games, the Avalanche are sure to win games 3 or 4, and they're going to kind of grind the series out from there and inevitably win, kind of like they did against the St. Louis Blues in round 2. The Avalanche are by far the better hockey team, and unfortunately I think the Oilers defense is what's going to get exposed here in the conference finals. They've had a really good run this year, but the Avalanche are just too good, and they will be going on to the Stanley Cup Final to play whoever grinds it out of the Eastern Conference. So my pick is the Colorado Avalanche in 6 games. Let me know what you guys think will happen in the Western Conference Finals here for the 2022 Stanley Cup playoffs. Leave your predictions down below. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.